Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
I want to start today by taking you somewhere specific. It's 3:00 a.m. It's New York City, maybe 1992. You're at the Sound Factory. The air is so thick with humidity and sweat that it's like practically raining from the ceiling. And the thing is, you're not really hearing a song anymore. You're not hearing a verse, a chorus, or a catchy little melody. You are just locked into this relentless, rolling thunder of drums. It feels ancient, like something out of a ritual. But it's coming out of these massive speakers that are literally shaking your ribcage.
That is a very vivid picture. And you're right, at that hour in those clubs, melody just became secondary. Today, we are talking about that specific heartbeat. We're unpacking the rhythm journey of tribal house.
Tribal house. Now, to the uninitiated, or maybe just my mom, that might sound like just drums. But looking at the deep dive materials we have today, calling it just drums is like calling a Ferrari just a car. It's technically true, but you're completely missing the point. So help us tune our ears here. When we say tribal house, what's the actual formula?
It's a fusion, really. It's a collision of two worlds. On one side, you have the standard house music engine, that steady, mechanical, four on the floor, kick drum, boom, 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 the pulse of the machine.
Right, the thing that makes you nod your head automatically.
Exactly. But then you overlay that rigid structure with these multi-layered organic percussion sounds. We're talking African or Latin instruments, congas, bongos, djembes.
So it's the machine meets the hand, the computer meets the skin of the drum.
Precisely. And the vibe that creates is very distinct, unlike, pop music or even vocal house, which relies on a singer to tell you how to feel. Tribal house relies on the groove itself to create the emotion. It creates this physical, percussion-heavy structure that is so deeply tied to the dynamics of the dance floor. It's music made specifically to be mixed by a DJ, to keep people moving for hours without a single break.
And that's the mission for this deep dive. We aren't just looking at a genre, we're tracing this rhythm journey. We're going to go from the late 80s, where sources call the beats primitive and raw, all the way to the high-tech, polished fusion we hear today. Because it seems like this genre is a perfect mirror for how technology changed music.
It really is. It's a case study in how the tools available to an artist completely dictate the art they make.
Okay, so let's get into the time machine. We have to rewind the tape to the late 80s and early 90s, Chicago and New York. Now, house music was already established, right? We had the warehouse in Chicago, we had the soulful stuff. Why did things start to get so, tribal?
Well, context is everything. Up until the late 80s, a lot of house music was still, I guess, the stepchild of disco. It had orchestration, pianos, vocals. It had that classic song structure. But the club culture began to diverge. DJs started looking for something harder, something deeper.
And this brings up a term I see in the notes, digger culture. Now, for anyone who thinks finding music means typing a word into a search bar, paint a picture of what digging actually meant back then.
It was physical labor. I mean, you were in dusty basements of record shops, sometimes with no air conditioning, flipping through thousands and thousands of vinyl records. And these DJs weren't looking for the top 40 hits. They were hunting for obscure Latin records, African import albums, B-sides of funk records. They were looking for breaks, those solitary moments where it's just the drummer going solo.
So they were literally hunting for raw materials.
Exactly. And the whole method of performance changed too. It wasn't just play song A, then play song B. It was about taking those ethnic sound sources and layering a live percussion feel over a house track in real time.
That sounds incredibly high stakes. You can't just hit a sync button.
No sync buttons. You had to ride the pitch control manually by ear. This was the era where the long mix culture was really cultivated. DJs needed tracks that could run for a long time, sometimes 10 minutes or more, just to allow them to blend these percussion layers seamlessly.
But hang on, 10 minutes. Doesn't that get boring? I mean, how many times can you hear the same drum loop before you start checking your watch?
That's the paradox. In a dark room with the right sound system, the repetition isn't boring. It's hypnotic. It puts you in a trance state. It completely disconnects you from linear time. You stop thinking about your job or your rent, and you just become part of the rhythm.
Okay, I get that. It's meditation through volume. But to pull that off, you need specific gear. The research highlights the tools of the trade for this era. We talk about instruments in rock bands like guitars and amps, but here, the turntable is the instrument.
Oh, absolutely. The Technics SL1200 series, that was the industry standard. If you walked into a booth in NYC in 1992, you saw 2 or 3 of these. But the real magic happened when they paired those turntables with drum machines, specifically the Roland TR-909 and TR-808.
The legend.
The 99 gave you that robotic, punchy kick drum, But the game changer was the sampler. Early samplers from Akai and Emu allowed DJs and producers to capture those conga hits from the vinyl records we just talked about.
But those early samplers, I mean, didn't they have something like, what, 2 seconds of memory?
Just about, if you were lucky. You had barely any memory to work with. You couldn't sample a whole song. You had to be incredibly choosy. You grabbed a single bar, a single hit, a tiny groove. And that limitation, it actually forced producers to be creative. They stripped everything back to the essentials. That tension between the robotic pulse of the 909 and the human gritty swing of a sampled loop, that is the birth of tribal house.
So you have these raw, kind of primitive ingredients. But then we move into the mid-90s, and the sound starts to tighten up. The sources call this the golden era, roughly 1994 to 2000. This is where the genre sort of gets its official uniform.
It matured, yeah. It went from being a technique that DJs use to a recognized genre. And you cannot talk about this era without mentioning one specific label, Tribal America.
Subtle name.
Very, but it was crucial. This US-based label basically gave the sound a brand, and this era gave us some titans. We have to talk about Danny Tenaglia.
Oh, absolutely. The notes point to his 1998 album, Tourism. But here's my question. We just said this is music for the club, for the mix. So why make an album? Doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose?
That was the risk. But tourism was pivotal because it proved that tribal house could be an artistic statement, not just a tool for DJs. Tenaglia took that club-leaning expression and gave it a narrative flow. It showed the genre had legs.
And speaking of people who bridge that gap, we have Deep Dish. Their album Junk Science came out the same year.
Right. And Deep Dish is usually associated more with progressive house, but Junk Science was so deeply connected to that 90s club feel. It showed that tribal was starting to bleed into other genres.
And actually, this brings up a really cool detail from the research that I had no idea about. There was this project called Circle Children.
Ah, yes.
And it turns out Circle Children was actually an alias for Armand van Helden, the guy who made You Don't Know Me, the Pop House King.
The very same.
So why the alias? Was he, I don't know, embarrassed by it or something?
Not embarrassed, no. I think it was more liberating. Under the Circle Children alias, he could explore these deeper, harder, percussion-heavy sounds without confusing his pop audience. It just shows you how pervasive this sound was. Even the top-tier superstars wanted to make tribal tracks, even if they had to do it in secret.
That's wild. It's like a secret society of drums. Now, during this golden era, the technology shifted again. We moved from just spinning records to using hardware samplers as the main production tool, and the notes highlight the Akai MPC.
The MPC is iconic. Most people know it from hip-hop history, J Dilla, Dr. Dre. But it was just as vital for tribal house.
Why? What makes an MPC different from, say, a computer?
It's the swing. The MPC had this very specific timing engine. It wasn't perfectly mathematical. It had a groove, a bounce that felt human. It allowed producers to chop up samples and play them back with these pads, layering them over the beat in a way that felt funky, not robotic. It cemented that bouncy tribal feel.
So it's a machine that learned how to have soul.
In a way, yes, you could put it that way.
Okay, so we hit the year 2000. Y2K. The world didn't end, but the studio changed forever. We enter the digital transformation.
This is a massive turning point. In the 2000s, the music moved from these hardware-centric studios to the digital audio workstation. The computer basically became the studio.
And how did that change the actual sound? Because to me, some of that early digital music sounded a bit thin.
At first, maybe, but what it allowed was incredibly refined sound design. Suddenly, you could put heavy effects processing on everything. You could put filters, reverb, and delay on a single conga hit.
Oh, I know exactly the sound you mean. That sweeping filter sound where the drums sound like they're going underwater and then bubbling back up to the surface.
That's the one. That liquid sound is a hallmark of the digital tribal era. And there was another side effect: accessibility. The rise of software sample packs made it so much easier for anyone to reproduce that tribal feel. You didn't need to dig through dusty crates anymore. You could just download a pack called Tribal Drums Volume 1.
Which is great for access, but I imagine it leads to a lot of generic copycats.
It's a double-edged sword, for sure. It democratizes the music, but it can dilute the uniqueness. However, it also led to some incredible tracks.
Okay, let's hit a few of those. If we look at the 2000s, who are the heavy hitters?
Well, kind of setting the stage, you have Junior Vasquez with If Madonna Calls. Technically late 90s, but it's completely defined the energy of the 2000s gay club scene. It was sassy, bold, sample-heavy.
And then you have the darker side.
Right, like Steve Lawler. His track Rise In from 2002, that showcased a darker, heavy groove. This is where tribal starts to bleed into what we now call dark tribal or even the roots of tech house.
And we can't skip the Iberian influence. Chusin Ceballos.
Baila, 2002. That track was inescapable. It brought this frantic, energetic Spanish percussion into the global conversation. It wasn't just a New York thing anymore. It was global.
Which brings us to today, the modern revival.
Yeah.
You might think, okay, tribal house, that's a 90s throwback thing.
Yeah.
But looking at the charts, it hasn't disappeared at all.
Not at all. It evolved. The key driver now is globalization. Streaming just accelerated the fusion of tribal house with Afro house.
Afro house seems to be everywhere right now.
It is the spiritual successor. Artists like Black Coffee really spearheaded this. His track, You Need Me, from 2021 is a perfect example. It's deep, it's soulful, it's textural. It's not just a DJ in New York trying to sound African. It's the sound coming directly from the source cultures and blending with modern tech.
And speaking of tech, the setup has changed again. We're in a hybrid era. What does a modern tribal producer's studio even look like?
It's the best of both worlds. It's now really common to capture live percussion in high-resolution studio-quality recording of real drummers and then process it electronically. They use software like Ableton Live, but combined with these massive libraries of ethnic percussion, like Native Instruments Machine.
And in the DJ booth. I keep seeing this term DVS. What is that? It sounds like a government agency.
It stands for Digital Vinyl System. It's where you use a real turntable with a special vinyl record to control the digital files on your laptop. So you get the tactile feel of scratching and mixing vinyl, but you have access to thousands of digital songs.
So the digging is digital, but the hands are still on the wheel.
Exactly. And you see modern tracks like Walking with Elephants by 10 Walls.
Oh, that brass riff.
Yeah.
You couldn't go to a festival in 2014 without hearing that.
Right. It showed that these tribal elements could support a huge, catchy melody. It wasn't just for the underground anymore, it was main stage.
Okay, we have to pause at the party for a second. We've talked about the fun, the gear, the beats. But there is a serious side to this. The expert source raises a really crucial point about ethics, specifically cultural appropriation.
This is the elephant in the room, and it's a necessary conversation. Tribal house, by its very definition, relies on borrowing elements from ethnic music, often from cultures that the producer does not belong to.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. Isn't music universal? If a DJ in London samples a drum beat from Kenya and it makes 5,000 people dance and feel joy, is that really a problem? Isn't that just appreciation?
It's a fine line,
Okay.
and a very important one. The problem arises when there's extraction without acknowledgement. If you take a sacred rhythm or a traditional song that has deep meaning for a community and you strip it of its context just to make a cool texture for a club track, and then you make money off it while the original artist gets nothing, that is where the ethical failure happens.
So it's about credit. It's about not treating culture like a sample pack you just found on the floor.
Exactly. The guideline suggested in our source material is one I think everyone should follow. Clarify the origins, show respect, don't just label it unknown jungle loop. Find out what it is. Say, this is a rhythm from this region, performed by this artist.
Knowledge is respect.
It is. And honestly, it makes the music better when you actually understand where it comes from.
We also missed a couple of key figures in the timeline that the notes mentioned. We talked about Circle Children, but who is Lula?
Lula, or Claudia Radbauer. She's an Austrian producer. She covers progressive and minimal house, but her work often overlaps with these tribal elements. It's just interesting to see how the sound permeated Europe, not just the U.S.
And Davidson Ospina.
El Cantor, NY-based DJ. He runs Ospina Digital. What's fascinating about him is his range. He does these deep underground tracks, but he also remixes for massive stars like Beyonce and Christina Aguilera. It just goes to show how the tribal sound really infiltrated pop music from the bottom up.
So let's bring this all home. We've traveled from the dusty basements of 1988 to the main stages of 2024. We've gone from analog tape to the cloud. What does this all mean for us?
If we summarize tribal house, we shouldn't just think of it as a genre tag on a Spotify playlist. It is a rhythm journey. It traveled from that primitive beat, reconnecting with our primal urge to dance, to drums, to a modern fusion where that urge meets cutting-edge technology.
It's like a shortcut to understanding dance music history.
Yeah.
You see the tech evolve, you see the culture evolve, but the core, that heartbeat, stays exactly the same.
And that is the key takeaway. It's where technology meets tradition. It will likely continue to evolve by inheriting its African and Latin roots while fusing with whatever new technology comes next.
So next time you are on a dance floor, maybe at 3 a.m., and you hear those congas kick in over the beat, You'll know exactly where that sound came from. You'll know about the diggers, the MPCs, and the long mixes that made it possible.
But before we go, I want to leave the listener with a final thought to mull over. We live in an age where you can drag and drop any sound from anywhere in the world instantly. You can pull a sacred drum beat from the cloud into your laptop in seconds. The question is, as that becomes easier and easier, how do we ensure we are preserving the soul of the original percussion, rather than just treating it as a piece of digital data?
That is a big question. Are we keeping the spirit alive, or are we just ghost hunting? Something to think about. Thanks for diving in with us.
It was a pleasure.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.